On June 25, 1941, just 3 days after Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against Soviet Union Finland, began its own offensive across Soviet border. This was not part of coordinated plan with Germany, though timing suggested otherwise. Finland had its own reasons for attacking Soviet Union. 15 months earlier, in March 1940, Finland had been forced to sign Moscow Peace Treaty, ending Winter War after 3.5 months of brutal fighting. That treaty cost Finland approximately 10% of its territory, including entire Karelian Isthmus city of Viipuri, Vyborg, and significant portions of eastern border regions. Nearly 450,000 Finns had been evacuated from lost territories. Finland's military, though victorious in many tactical engagements, had been exhausted by Soviet numerical superiority. Peace had come, but it was peace born of necessity, not victory. For 15 months, Finland prepared for war it believed would inevitably come again. Soviet Union had made clear through Moscow Peace Treaty and subsequent demands that it saw Finland as within its sphere of influence. Soviet Union had already occupied Baltic states in June 1940. Soviet Union had demanded and received lease of Hanko Peninsula for naval base. Soviet Union showed every sign of returning to finish what Winter War had started. Finland rebuilt its military. Finland purchased weapons from any country willing to sell. Finland accepted German assistance, including weapons training and political support. Finland did not sign formal military alliance with Germany, but relationship grew closer as Soviet threat loomed. When Germany attacked Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, Finland faced decision. Finland could remain neutral and hope Soviet Union would respect neutrality despite recent history. Finland could join Germany and attempt to regain lost territories. Finland chose latter, though Finnish leadership carefully maintained position that Finland was fighting separate war for separate goals. Finland called this conflict Continuation War, because it was continuation of Winter War interrupted by 15-month armistice. Soviet Union and later Western allies considered Finland to be German ally and co-belligerent. Distinction mattered to Finns even if it did not matter to others. Finnish offensive began June 25 after Soviet aircraft bombed Finnish cities on previous days. Whether Soviet bombing was preemptive strike or response to German aircraft using Finnish airfields remains debated. Regardless, bombing provided Finland with justification for offensive that Finnish public strongly supported. Finns remembered Winter War losses. Finns wanted Karelia back. Finns wanted secure borders. Finns wanted revenge for what they saw as unjust Soviet aggression 15 months earlier. Initial Finnish offensive advanced rapidly. Soviet forces in Karelia were not prepared for Finnish attack. Much of Red Army was engaged with Germans further south. Soviet defenses in Karelia had not been significantly strengthened since Winter War. Finnish forces knew terrain intimately. Finnish forces had trained specifically for offensive operations to regain lost territory. Within weeks, Finnish forces had recaptured Viipuri and were advancing toward old 1939 borders. By September 1941, Finland had regained all territory lost in Winter War, plus occupied additional Soviet territory in eastern Karelia. Finnish advance brought Finnish forces to outskirts of Leningrad from north. This created a situation that would define much of Continuation War and create lasting controversy about Finnish role in siege of Leningrad. Finnish forces stopped their advance largely at old 1939 borders. Finland had achieved primary goal of regaining lost territory. Finnish leadership, particularly Field Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim, who commanded Finnish defense forces, had no desire to advance further into Soviet territory. Finland was fighting what it considered defensive war to regain what had been taken. Finland was not fighting war of conquest. However, Finnish positions north of Leningrad meant Finland was participating in siege, even if not intentionally. German forces approached Leningrad from south and east. Finnish forces blocked northern approaches. Leningrad was encircled. Siege of Leningrad would last 872 days, from September 1941 to January 1944. Siege would cause death of approximately 1 million Soviet civilians, mostly from starvation. Finnish role in this catastrophe remains deeply controversial. Finnish government maintained then and historians debate now that Finland did not intentionally participate in siege. Finland had stopped at old borders. Finland did not advance on Leningrad itself. Finland was simply defending regained territory. Soviet Union and many historians argue that regardless of Finnish intentions, Finnish positions blocked supply routes and contributed directly to starvation deaths. Truth lies somewhere between these positions. Finland did stop offensive largely at old borders, showing restraint Germany did not show. Finland did refuse German requests to advance further toward Leningrad. Finland did allow some supply traffic through Finnish-controlled areas under specific circumstances. However, Finnish military presence did block northern supply routes. Finnish artillery did fire on Soviet positions and supply lines. Finnish forces did cooperate with German forces on operational level, even if not strategically. Whether this constitutes intentional participation in siege or simply defense of Finnish territory depends largely on perspective of historian making judgment. What is clear is that Finnish society was united in support of continuation war, in ways that would have been impossible for purely offensive war. Finns saw themselves as fighting for survival and return of stolen territory. Finns did not see themselves as aggressors. This self-perception allowed Finland to maintain morale and military effectiveness for 3 years of warfare. This self-perception also created blind spots about Finnish actions and their consequences that Finland would struggle with for decades after war ended. Military situation from late 1941 through 1943 was largely static on Finnish front. Finland had achieved its territorial goals. Finland had no interest in advancing further. Soviet Union was too engaged with Germany to launch major offensive against Finland. Both sides fortified positions. Both sides engaged in patrol actions and limited operations. Both sides settled into defensive stance that would characterize this period of continuation war. This suited Finland well. Finland had limited manpower and industrial capacity. Prolonged offensive war would have exhausted Finnish resources quickly. Defensive war allowed Finland to husband resources and maintain military capability, while Germany fought main battles against Soviet Union further south. German-Finnish military cooperation during this period was significant but limited. Germany provided substantial military aid, including aircraft, anti-aircraft guns, and other weapons Finland desperately needed. German forces operated in northern Finland, pursuing their own objectives, including protection of nickel mines at Petsamo that were crucial for German war industry. German officers served as advisors to Finnish military. However, Finland maintained separate command structure. Finland pursued separate strategic objectives. Finland refused to place Finnish forces under German command. Finland maintained diplomatic relations with Western allies, even while fighting alongside Germany. This distinction would prove crucial when war turned against Germany and Finland sought way out of conflict. Finnish home front during continuation war was mobilized to extent few other nations achieved. Finland, with population of approximately 4 million, had over 600,000 men under arms at peak of mobilization. This represented approximately 16% of total population and much higher percentage of male population. Every Finnish family was directly affected by war. Agriculture was mechanized as much as possible to compensate for men at front. Women took on roles in agriculture industry and even military support functions that would have been unthinkable in peacetime Finnish society. Rationing was strict but generally equitable. Finnish society demonstrated remarkable cohesion and endurance that allowed small nation to field military force far beyond what population numbers would suggest possible. Economic situation was challenging. Finland's economy was largely agricultural with limited industry. War cut Finland off from many traditional trading partners. Finland became increasingly dependent on Germany for industrial goods, weapons, and even food supplies. This economic dependence created political vulnerabilities Finland would struggle with as war progressed. Finland paid for German assistance with raw materials, particularly timber and nickel. Finland also granted Germany transit rights through Finnish territory to German forces in northern Norway. These arrangements deepened Finnish-German relationship even as Finnish leadership tried to maintain political distance. Turning point came in June 1944. Soviet Union, having pushed German forces back from Leningrad and stabilized Eastern Front, was ready to deal with Finland. On June 9, 1944, Soviet Union launched Vyborg-Petrozavodsk offensive, massive assault on Finnish positions in Karelian Isthmus and Ladoga, Karelia. Soviet objective was to knock Finland out of war before launching final offensives against Germany. Soviet forces assembled for offensive were overwhelming. Soviet Union had learned bitter lessons from Winter War about Finnish defensive capabilities. Soviet Union was not going to underestimate Finns again. Initial Soviet assault achieved breakthrough at several points. Finnish defensive lines that had held for 3 years were shattered in days. Viipuri fell to Soviet forces June 20th. Finnish forces retreated toward new defensive positions. Finnish government faced existential crisis. If Soviet offensive continued, Finnish defensive capabilities might collapse completely. Finland might face occupation and fate similar to Baltic states. Finnish leadership made urgent requests to Germany for additional military assistance, while simultaneously reaching out to Soviet Union through various channels to explore possibility of armistice. German assistance came in form of weapons, ammunition, aircraft, and one German infantry division. This assistance was crucial in stabilizing Finnish front, but came with German demands that Finland not seek separate peace. Finland promised to continue fighting, while secretly continuing to explore armistice terms with Soviet Union. This diplomatic double game was risky, but necessary. Finland needed German military assistance to survive Soviet offensive. Finland also needed way out of war before Soviet Union could mount another offensive that Finland might not survive. Finnish forces established new defensive line at Viipuri Bay and managed to halt Soviet advance by early July. Battle of Tali-Ihantala, fought June 25th through July 9th, is considered one of largest battles in Scandinavian history. Finnish forces with German support inflicted heavy casualties on Soviet attackers and stopped offensive. Soviet Union continued smaller-scale attacks through July and into August, but did not achieve strategic breakthrough. By late August, Soviet Union was preparing for autumn offensives against Germany and was willing to negotiate with Finland rather than commit additional forces to Finnish campaign that was proving unexpectedly costly. Finnish leadership faced difficult choice. Finland could continue fighting alongside Germany and hope for negotiated peace or even German victory, though by mid-1944, German defeat was clearly approaching. Finland could seek separate armistice with Soviet Union and risk German retaliation. Finnish leadership chose latter. Secret negotiations with Soviet Union intensified through August 1944. Soviet terms were harsh. Finland would have to break relations with Germany. Finland would have to accept borders from 1940 Moscow Peace Treaty, meaning loss of regained territories. Finland would have to pay substantial reparations. Finland would have to expel or intern German forces in Finland. Finland would have to grant Soviet Union base rights on Finnish territory. These terms were difficult to accept, but alternative was continued war that Finland could not win. Soviet Union made clear that terms would become harsher if Finland delayed. Germany made clear through increasingly threatening statements that German retaliation against Finland seeking separate peace would be severe. Finland calculated that Soviet Union represented greater threat than Germany at this stage of war. Germany was losing war and could not maintain forces in Finland indefinitely. Soviet Union bordered Finland directly and would remain threat after war ended. Finland needed to make peace with Soviet Union even at cost of German relationship. On September 2, 1944, Finnish government issued statement announcing cessation of hostilities with Soviet Union and demanding German forces leave Finnish territory. Germany had prepared for this possibility. German forces began organized withdrawal from Finland toward northern Norway. However, German withdrawal was not peaceful. German forces implemented scorched earth policy in northern Finland, destroying infrastructure, buildings, and anything of value. This destruction turned former allies into enemies and led to what became known as Lapland War. Lapland War lasted from September 1944 through April 1945. Finland was required by armistice terms to expel German forces from Finnish territory. Finland had to demonstrate to Soviet Union that it was serious about breaking with Germany. Initial Finnish operations against German forces were half-hearted. Finland hoped Germans would withdraw peacefully. Germans hoped Finns would not seriously oppose German withdrawal. However, Soviet Union pressed Finland to take more aggressive action. Finland had no choice but to escalate military operations against former German allies. Fighting in Lapland was bitter. German forces outnumbered Finnish forces in north and were well equipped with strong defensive positions. Finnish forces had to advance through difficult terrain against prepared defenses. Weather as winter approached was brutal. Both sides took significant casualties. German scorched earth policy destroyed approximately 40% of buildings in Lapland and left region devastated. This destruction created lasting bitterness in Finnish society, particularly in Lapland, where population suffered most. Strategically, Lapland War served its purpose. Soviet Union was satisfied that Finland was fulfilling armistice terms. Germany was driven from Finnish territory by April 1945, just before Germany's final collapse. Finland avoided Soviet occupation and maintained independence unlike Baltic states. However, cost was heavy in destroyed infrastructure, German reprisals and casualties from fighting former allies. Moscow Armistice, signed September 19, 1944, formally ended continuation war between Finland and Soviet Union. Terms reflected harsh reality of Finland's military situation. Finland accepted borders from 1940 Moscow Peace Treaty. Finland ceded Petsamo region in north, giving Soviet Union direct border with Norway and access to nickel mines. Finland granted Soviet Union 50-year lease on Porkala Peninsula near Helsinki for naval base. Finland agreed to pay $300 million in reparations over 6 years. Finland agreed to legalize Communist Party, which had been banned. Finland agreed to try Finnish wartime leaders for war crimes, though these trials were largely symbolic and sentences minimal. What Finland retained was more significant than what Finland lost. Finland retained independence. Finland retained its democratic system of government. Finland retained its market economy. Finland avoided occupation by either Germany or Soviet Union. Finland maintained diplomatic relations with Western nations. Finland preserved its cultural identity and national sovereignty. When compared to fate of Baltic states, which were occupied by Soviet Union and incorporated into USSR, or fate of Eastern European nations, which became Soviet satellites, Finland's situation, though difficult, was remarkably better. Casualties from continuation war tell story of conflict's intensity. Finland suffered approximately 63,000 deaths, including military personnel and civilians. Finland suffered approximately 158,000 wounded. Total Finnish casualties of approximately 221,000 represented over 5% of Finland's total population. This casualty rate was among highest of any nation in World War II relative to population. Soviet casualties are estimated at approximately 250,000 total, though exact figures remain disputed. Soviet Union did not prioritize accurate casualty reporting, and many records were lost or destroyed. However, Soviet casualties, particularly during 1944, Vyborg offensive, were substantial, reflecting intensity of fighting and Finnish defensive effectiveness. Material losses were also significant. Finland lost approximately 10% of industrial capacity, including hydroelectric plants and factories in ceded territories. Finland lost productive agricultural land in Karelia. Finland lost access to Lake Ladoga and its fisheries. Finland lost Saimaa Canal, connecting Finland's lake system to Baltic Sea. Finland faced massive refugee crisis as approximately 400,000 Finns evacuated from territories ceded to Soviet Union. These refugees had to be resettled in remaining Finnish territory, creating economic and social challenges that persisted for years. Reparations represented enormous burden for Finnish economy. $300 million calculated in 1938 gold dollar values represented approximately equivalent of Finland's total annual exports. Finland had to deliver reparations in goods, including machinery, ships, railway equipment. Finland had to build new industries to produce goods Soviet Union demanded. This forced industrialization, though painful in short term, ultimately contributed to Finland's post-war economic development. Finland paid final reparation installment in 1952, 7 years after war ended. Finland was only nation on losing side of World War II to fully pay all reparations demanded. Political consequences of continuation war shaped Finnish politics for decades. Finland had to navigate careful line between Western democracy and Soviet sphere of influence. This balancing act became known as Finlandization. Though Finns themselves disliked term, Finland maintained democratic institutions, free press and market economy, while carefully avoiding positions that might antagonize Soviet Union. Finland could not join NATO or other Western military alliances. Finland could not accept Marshall Plan aid from United States. Finland had to maintain friendly relations with Soviet Union, regardless of internal Finnish political preferences. This constrained sovereignty, though frustrating, allowed Finland to maintain independence and prosperity, while neighboring nations languished under Soviet control. Mannerheim's role in continuation war remains central to Finnish understanding of conflict. Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim had commanded Finnish forces in Winter War, earning legendary status. Mannerheim commanded forces again in continuation war, bringing his defensive expertise and international credibility. Mannerheim understood Finland's strategic limitations. Mannerheim knew Finland could not win prolonged offensive war against Soviet Union. Mannerheim knew Finland had to maintain support of international community, particularly United States, despite fighting alongside Germany. Mannerheim navigated these contradictory requirements with skill that preserved Finland's independence. When Finnish President Risto Ryti resigned in August 1944, having personally promised Germany that Finland would not seek separate peace, Mannerheim became president and immediately began armistice negotiations. Mannerheim argued credibly that as new president, he was not bound by Riti's promises to Germany. This legal fiction allowed Finland to extricate itself from German alliance. Mannerheim remained president through armistice negotiations and into post-war period before retiring in 1946. His leadership during continuation war is credited with saving Finnish independence. Military lessons from continuation war influenced post-war Finnish defense policy. Finland learned that small nation could defend itself against larger neighbor through combination of prepared defenses, motivated troops, and strategic positioning. Finland learned that technological disadvantage could be overcome through tactical excellence, terrain knowledge, and defensive advantages. Finland learned that international politics matter as much as military capability. Finland learned that maintaining independence required avoiding entangling alliances that might force Finland into conflicts not in Finnish interest. These lessons shaped Finland's Cold War policy of armed neutrality. Finland maintained strong defensive military capability while avoiding NATO membership. Finland purchased weapons from both East and West, maintaining technological edge without political commitment to either bloc. This policy preserved Finnish independence through Cold War and continues to influence Finnish security policy today. Siege of Leningrad controversy continues to complicate Finnish historical memory of continuation war. Finnish participation, even if largely passive in siege that caused million civilian deaths, cannot be easily dismissed. Finnish historians have debated extent of Finnish responsibility for decades. Some argue Finland was simply defending its own territory and cannot be held responsible for German siege tactics against Leningrad. Others argue Finnish positions on Karelian Isthmus made siege possible by blocking northern supply routes, and therefore Finland bears moral responsibility for starvation deaths. Soviet and Russian historians universally blame Finland as equal participant with Germany in deliberate starvation policy. Truth is complex and uncomfortable for all sides. What is documented is that Finnish government was aware of humanitarian catastrophe in Leningrad. Finnish leadership received intelligence reports about starvation conditions. Finnish leadership was pressed by Germany to take more active role in siege. Finnish leadership resisted German pressure, but also did not actively work to alleviate humanitarian crisis. Finnish leadership prioritized Finnish security and territorial goals over Soviet civilian suffering. This pragmatic calculation, while understandable in context of total war, raises moral questions that Finland struggled with then and continues to debate now. Swedish neutrality during continuation war represented major diplomatic disappointment for Finland. Sweden and Finland shared deep cultural and historical ties. Sweden had ruled Finland for 6 centuries until 1809. Swedish was second official language in Finland. Many Finns expected Swedish support, or at least benevolent neutrality. Instead, Sweden maintained strict neutrality that benefited Germany and Soviet Union more than Finland. Sweden refused to provide military assistance to Finland beyond limited volunteer forces. Sweden did accept Finnish children as refugees during war, evacuating approximately 70,000 Finnish children to Swedish families. Sweden did provide humanitarian assistance. However, Sweden's refusal to compromise neutrality meant Finland faced Soviet Union and later had to navigate German withdrawal largely alone. Finnish-Swedish relations were strained by this perceived abandonment, though relationships normalized after war. United States' position toward Finland was more sympathetic than toward other nations fighting alongside Germany. United States never declared war on Finland, though United States did declare war on other German co-belligerents. United States maintained diplomatic relations with Finland throughout continuation war. United States provided Finland with intelligence about Soviet positions and intentions. United States encouraged Finland to seek separate peace with Soviet Union. United States worked to moderate Soviet demands on Finland during armistice negotiations. This sympathetic American position reflected several factors. United States had large Finnish-American community that lobbied for Finland. United States recognized Finland's democratic government as distinct from fascist regimes in Germany, Italy, and elsewhere. United States appreciated Finland's independent strategic goals, separate from German conquest aims. United States saw value in preserving Finland as democratic nation in region likely to fall under Soviet influence after war. This American sympathy, though limited to diplomatic support, helped Finland maintain international legitimacy and contributed to favorable post-war outcomes. Cultural impact of continuation war on Finnish society was profound. Finland lost significant portion of male population to death and injury. Finland lost territory that had been inhabited by Finns for centuries. Finland lost sense of security that had existed before Winter War. However, Finland also demonstrated to itself and world that small nation could defend independence against great power through courage, skill, and unity. This demonstration became central to Finnish national identity. Finland remembered both wars against Soviet Union as struggles for survival that Finland won through endurance and sacrifice. This memory shaped Finnish politics, culture, and psychology for generations. Finland built strong social welfare state, partly as recognition of shared sacrifice during wars. Finland invested heavily in education and technology to remain competitive despite small population. Finland maintained conscription-based defense forces, ensuring every Finnish man received military training. Finland never forgot that independence had to be defended constantly against threats external and internal. Soviet perspective on continuation war differed fundamentally from Finnish perspective. Soviet Union saw continuation war as part of Great Patriotic War against fascist Germany and its allies. Soviet Union made no distinction between Germany and Finland as aggressors. Soviet Union blamed Finland for participating in Leningrad siege and for attacking Soviet Union in 1941. Soviet Union demanded reparations, war crimes trials, and territorial concessions as punishment for Finnish aggression. However, Soviet Union also recognized that completely crushing Finland was not worth cost. Soviet offensive in June 1944 had been expensive in casualties and resources. Soviet Union had higher priority targets in Germany and Eastern Europe. Soviet Union calculated that armistice leaving Finland independent but constrained served Soviet interests better than occupation that would require substantial garrison forces and create resistance movement. This calculation proved correct, as Finland, while maintaining independence, accepted Soviet sphere of influence throughout Cold War. German perspective on Finland combined respect for Finnish military capability with frustration at Finnish independence. Germany valued Finnish forces as they tied down Soviet troops that otherwise could be deployed against Germany. Germany provided substantial military aid to Finland throughout continuation war. Germany hoped Finnish offensive would capture Leningrad or at least cut Murmansk railway supply line. However, Germany was constantly frustrated by Finnish refusal to advance beyond old 1939 borders. Germany was angered by Finnish secret negotiations with Soviet Union. Germany felt betrayed when Finland signed armistice and turned against German forces in Lapland. However, Germany was in no position by autumn 1944 to retaliate effectively. German forces withdrew from Finland, destroying infrastructure in petty vengeance, but otherwise unable to punish Finland for leaving alliance. German-Finnish relationship ended in bitterness that would take decades to heal. Post-war trials of Finnish leaders for war crimes were unprecedented and controversial. Allied Control Commission, led by Soviet representatives, demanded Finland prosecute political and military leaders responsible for continuation war. Finland held trials in 1945 and 46. 8 Finnish leaders, including wartime President Risto Ryti and Prime Minister, were convicted of responsibility for war and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 2 to 10 years. Mannerheim was not prosecuted due to his role in negotiating armistice and his continued position as president. These trials were widely seen as Soviet-imposed victors' justice. However, sentences were relatively lenient and most convicted were released early. Trials served political purpose of satisfying Soviet demands while not completely discrediting Finnish wartime leadership. Convicted leaders were later rehabilitated and some returned to political life. Trials remain controversial in Finnish history as they required Finland to criminalize defensive war that most Finns believed was justified. Long-term consequences of continuation war shaped Northern European geopolitics throughout Cold War and beyond. Finland's unique position as neutral democracy on Soviet border influenced Sweden's neutrality policy. Finland's experience showed that maintaining independence under Soviet pressure was possible through careful diplomacy and credible defense. Finland's success in paying reparations and rebuilding economy demonstrated that defeated nation could recover through hard work and pragmatic policies. Finland's maintenance of democratic institutions under Soviet pressure encouraged other small nations facing similar challenges. Finland's relationship with Soviet Union and later Russia showed that former enemies could develop productive relationship based on mutual interests rather than ideology. Economic development following continuation war transformed Finland from agricultural society to modern industrial economy. Reparations forced Finland to build shipyards, factories, and industrial capacity that did not exist before war. These industries continued operating after reparations ended, producing goods for export to Soviet Union and West. Finland developed strong forestry industry, exploiting vast forest resources. Finland invested heavily in education, creating skilled workforce. Finland built comprehensive social welfare system that provided security and opportunity for all citizens. By 1970s, Finland had become one of wealthiest and most developed nations in world, despite losing 2 wars and paying substantial reparations. This economic miracle was directly connected to challenges and forced industrialization from continuation war and its aftermath. Military legacy of continuation war continued through Cold War and into modern era. Finnish defense forces maintained conscription, ensuring military training for all able-bodied men. Finland developed defensive strategy based on lessons from both wars against Soviet Union. Finland maintained credible deterrent force that convinced Soviet Union throughout Cold War that occupying Finland would be too costly. Finland purchased weapons from multiple sources, avoiding dependence on either East or West. Finland developed civil defense infrastructure, including extensive underground shelters for civilian population. Finland maintained doctrine of territorial defense, where entire nation would resist invasion, rather than relying on professional military alone. These policies kept Finland independent throughout Cold War, when many nations with less effective defense policies fell under Soviet control. Continuation war's place in Finnish memory remains complex. Finns remember war as defensive struggle for independence, not as aggressive war of conquest. Finns honor veterans who fought and died. Finns remember evacuees who lost homes and livelihoods. However, Finns also grapple with uncomfortable questions about Finnish participation in Leningrad siege and alliance with Nazi Germany. Finnish historiography has evolved over decades from simple narrative of defensive war to more nuanced understanding that acknowledges moral complexities and controversial aspects. Younger generations of Finns question aspects of wartime policy that older generations defended. This evolution in historical understanding shows healthy democracy grappling with difficult past rather than refusing to acknowledge it. Comparison with Baltic states provides context for understanding Finland's achievement in maintaining independence. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, like Finland, were independent nations in 1939. Like Finland, they were invaded by Soviet Union in 1939–40. Unlike Finland, they did not successfully resist initial Soviet occupation. Baltic states were occupied by Soviet Union in June 1940, then by Germany 1941–44, then by Soviet Union again 1944–45. Baltic states lost independence for 50 years until collapse of Soviet Union in 1991. Baltic peoples suffered mass deportations to Siberia, forced collectivization, suppression of national culture, and decades of occupation. Finland avoided all of this through combination of military resistance, diplomatic skill, and good fortune. Finland's success in maintaining independence while Baltic neighbors lost theirs for half-century demonstrates how different choices and circumstances led to vastly different outcomes for similar nations facing similar threats. Lessons from continuation war remain relevant for small nations today. Finland demonstrated that military capability matters even for small nations. Finland showed that unity and national will can overcome numerical disadvantage. Finland proved that careful diplomacy can extract nation from impossible situations. Finland illustrated that maintaining independence sometimes requires difficult compromises and accepting less than perfect outcomes. Finland exemplified how defeated nation can rebuild and prosper through pragmatism and hard work. These lessons apply not just to military history, but to broader questions of how small nations navigate world dominated by great powers. Continuation war was second round of Finnish-Soviet conflict within 5 years. Finland fought because it wanted to regain lost territory, secure borders, and maintain independence. Finland joined with Germany not from ideological affinity, but from strategic necessity. Finland stopped offensive largely at old borders, showing restraint. Finland held against Soviet offensive in 1944, demonstrating military effectiveness. Finland negotiated armistice before total defeat, allowing survival. Finland fought former German allies to prove commitment to armistice terms. Finland paid crushing reparations and accepted territorial losses. Finland maintained independence, avoiding fate of Baltic states and Eastern European nations. Finland transformed defeat into opportunity for modernization. Finland emerged from war as stronger nation, despite heavy losses. This is story of continuation war, 1941–44, Finland's second war against Soviet Union, and Finland's successful though painful struggle for survival and independence.